understanding the basic psychology of the dog you have in your house is quite important. I was just kind of talking about punishment and what punishment actually means. Okay, so when we're talking about punishment, we say punishment, and like you think about like say like I'm punishing a child, right? Like I would think the first thing that comes to my mind is I'm going to smack the child. That would be like a clear punisher in our brain, right? So we think punishment means aversive. Okay, it means you're adding something aversive to the situation. So aversive just means like something that the organism wants to avoid. Okay, but punishment just means that it reduces a behavior. Okay, so anything, there's a number of different things that can be punishing to an organism, humans, dogs, whatever it may be, and as long as that whatever it is seen as a punishment to the organism, it will reduce a behavior. Okay, so for example, say I don't like say I get really uncomfortable when someone makes eye contact with me. And that makes me kind of very uncertain. That would be seen as like that could be used as a punisher, right? Because I'm uncomfortable when someone looks at me in the eyes. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, a punisher is you're smacking the dog, you're hitting the dog. It's just something that reduces behavior. Okay. So another common one used as punishment would be, taking something away that the organism wants. So if, say, you had a child and they're misbehaving at school or they're doing something that you want to stop, you take their PlayStation away. That is a form of punishment. Okay. And we would use that in a way to reduce a behavior. Okay. So whenever you're working and communicating with your dog, you're looking at operant conditioning. Okay, so operant conditioning has 4 sectors to it. So we have positive reinforcement. So that is like, adding something that increases a behavior. So adding something, so like food rewards would be something that is positive reinforcement. You have negative reinforcement. So that is something unpleasant stopping, or something that the organism wants to stop stopping. Okay, so that would be the same as nagging. So if I was nagging you constantly, going, do this, do this, do this, and then you eventually did it and I stopped nagging you, that would be negative reinforcement. So the nagging would be the thing that you want to stop, and then when it stops that, I stop when you do the behavior, that would reinforce the behavior. Okay, then you have positive punishment. So that's adding something that reduces a behavior. Okay, so reinforcement increases a behavior, punishment reduces a behavior. So positive punishment is adding something that reduces a behavior, and negative punishment is taking something away that reduces a behavior. Okay, so that's when you're talking about operant conditioning and communicating with the dog, that is what you are doing at all times. There's some form of that happening. Okay, so positive reinforcement could be physical praise, patting the dog, talking to the dog. It could be giving the dog food rewards, playing with the dog. These are all forms of reinforcement, positive reinforcement. So you're adding something that increases the behavior. Okay. So if, let's say we're thinking about that on our day-to-day living, and we're, say, giving the dog affection completely at random, we are playing with the dog completely at random, we are doing certain things completely at random that are reinforcing to the dog, they are going to reinforce whatever the behavior is at that moment in time, meaning we're going to see an increase in that behavior. Okay, so if we had a dog, say, that was lunging or barking or whining or doing a behavior that we didn't want to happen, and we were patting the dog, we are actually reinforcing the behavior, saying, like, we want to see more of this behavior. Okay, so that's how you've got to think about it. You're thinking about it like a scientist. You're not thinking about it in terms of, oh, my dog is feeling uncomfortable or upset. Like, that may be true. Your dog may be feeling uncomfortable. However, dealing with it by adding reinforcement isn't going to make the dog feel better. It's just going to increase the behavior. So that's how you've got to start to think about it, right? So if we've got a behavior we want to decrease, so let's say barking at the front door, we don't want to reinforce the behavior. We don't want to reinforce the barking at the front door. However, we could reinforce the dog's sitting down or relaxing. Okay, so we could say we're going to not do anything, which would be a form of negative punishment. So we're taking, we're ignoring the dog, or provided that would be something, us giving the dog attention or talking to the dog would be something that is reinforcing for the dog. If we didn't do that, that would be a form of negative punishment. So we're taking something away from the situation that would otherwise reinforce the behavior. And then we are reinforcing the dog when he does the right thing. So let's say we ignore him, he eventually stops, he sits and relaxes. We would mark and reinforce that behavior, saying like, we want to see more of this behavior. So what we've done is we've put the barking on extinction. We've said, when you bark, we're going to take something away that you want. That will be negative punishment. And then we're going to reinforce the dog when he does something that is wanted, okay, which would be a form of positive reinforcement. Okay, so this is kind of how operant conditioning works. And this is how, like I said, this is constantly what we're doing in our day-to-day life, even with humans, when we're communicating with each other, when we tell each other, oh, that's a great job, that's positive reinforcement. When we nag someone, that's negative punishment. When we, tell someone off, that's positive punishment. When we ignore somebody, or we ignore a particular behavior, that's negative punishment. So we're taking something away that the organism wants to reduce the behavior. Okay, so this is happening in all walks of life. And if you don't think about your communication with your dog like this, it's highly likely you're going to be giving the dog mixed signals. So the dog isn't going to understand what you are saying. So you're saying like, oh, in my mind, the dog is uncomfortable, so I want to make the dog feel better, so I'm going to pet the dog. Okay. But if we break that down, like I said, you're actually reinforcing the behavior, telling the dog, we want to see more of this. Okay. And then what happens is we do that over and over and over again. The behavior increases. Then we finally get frustrated because the behavior is not getting better. And then we act off that frustration, which creates a huge amount of confusion, because the dog's going, you've just reinforced me 20 times for this particular thing unintentionally. Now you're punishing me unpredictably, and I have no idea what's going on. And then the dog gets very, very confused, and we end up with a confused dog that generally starts to lose trust in us, and the cycle begins. Okay, so these are things that you want to be thinking about as a pet owner: is how is my behavior affecting the dog on a day-to-day basis? Am I thinking about when I am reinforcing the dog? Am I thinking about how I am delivering forms of punishment to the dog and what I am punishing? Why am I punishing this? Like, is there clear rationale behind what I am doing? And that's what you're looking for as a pet owner, to make things very clear for you and the dog. And when you start to think like this, things will just start to get very clear and click. And you'll be like, oh, all of a sudden our relationship's a lot better. All of a sudden I understand why the dog's doing this. I'm not feeling so frustrated, and life becomes a lot easier.